Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Futurum Tech Webcast. We're glad to have you. In this episode, my colleague Sarah Wallace and I are going to talk about tech vendors and how they're collaborating and how that is a trend that we see moving forward and increasing in the future. Sarah, great to have you. Can't wait to have this discussion. I think it's an interesting one.
Great joining this webcast with you today, Shelly.
So, as I said, we've talked about this a bunch, and how we're really seeing vendors collaborate together and bring offerings direct to the customer. And I think that's good for vendors, and I think it's good for customers. And really, I think that's what it's all about. Some of the things that we've been looking at recently, some major brands and some partnerships that we've seen on the horizon, I think are kind of interesting and certainly part of this discussion. So, Sarah, you want to maybe kick off one of the vendor partnerships that you've been paying attention to that you think is interesting for the future?
Sure. So one of the major collaborations that we've seen announced this summer, and this is very pertinent according to what's been going on with the global pandemic. So we've seen Cisco and ServiceNow. They've recently announced that they now have an integration of Cisco's indoor location services platform called DNA Spaces. And with this collaboration, DNA Spaces now integrates with ServiceNow's contact tracing and workplace safety applications. And this is a collaboration that the main goal here is to improve contact tracing for COVID-19 tracing efforts, and especially as we see companies starting to have employees go back to work. So basically, the main integration here is that Cisco's location-based data will now be imported into ServiceNow's contact tracing app. And this will help to identify potential interactions with an affected employee. So some caveats here. Users of the contact tracing integration, they will have to be on the same Wi-Fi network. And depending on the employer, employees may have to opt into this. So this is up to each individual employer. And I know that you and Olivier have had other extensive webcasts about contact tracing and privacy concerns.
And it certainly is something that's an issue. And I was looking at this, I do feel like there are some significant challenges, and, the biggest of which is privacy issues. And I think we look at, a situation, can employees opt in, or is it mandatory? It becomes an interesting thing in a work environment. I know there's a lot of technology at place in work environments right now that tracks employee work time, productivity, when they check in, what their keystrokes are. I mean, there's all kinds of monitoring that's going on. So in some senses, this is an add-on to workplace monitoring that's already happening. But I do think that there are significant, when it comes to contact tracing, for some reason that sets off alarm bells for people. So it'd be interesting to see how companies deal with this and what their messaging is around that. And, the reality of it is, if people want to get back to normal, whatever that is for all of us, and it's different for all of us, I think there are logical things that we need to do. And this kind of technology, I think, helps us do that. I think the other thing that's a challenge in this particular partnership is that customers have to be customers of both Cisco and ServiceNow in order to get this, in order to use this kind of functionality. So that could be, it could be a sales opportunity. It could be, but it could also be a barrier. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing. Let's talk a little bit about some other vendor partnerships. Tell me a little bit about the IBM and Adobe partnership that's focused on customer experience and data management in the cloud.
Sure. So these are two cloud players that are coming together. Adobe, the last 3 years or so, has really been concentrating on its customer experience platform. It's Adobe Experience Cloud. And so it's combining and joining forces with IBM and IBM Red Hat. As we know, IBM acquired Red Hat in 2019, which is a container cloud platform. So IBM has really been leveraging Red Hat in terms of its offerings and also, and in this case, partnerships. So basically the main points of this partnership is to help accelerate digital transformation, strengthen real-time data security for their enterprise customers, and especially focus on regulated industries. And as we know, IBM, especially since last fall, has been announcing their intent to focus on regulated industries. So they've come out with their IBM Financial Services Ready Public Cloud. They're also laser focused on healthcare. So basically, this collaboration is really making a push for IBM's focus on regulated industries, and Adobe helping them with the customer experience piece. So it's a really smart partnership.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's an interesting one as well. One vendor partnership that I've been kind of paying a little bit of attention to is SAP and HPE, who've partnered to deliver enterprise cloud on-prem. And I think that this offering will make the private cloud service, SAP HANA, Enterprise Cloud, and a licensed subscription available to customers who want to keep their SAP landscape, the SAP software landscape and data within their own data center environment. And I think that, so in order to do this, though, SAP announced the selection of HPE and GreenLake team as its strategic partner. And this is an interesting move, I think, and it's great to see, SAP kind of cloudify its solution by migrating toward a software as a service model. And this is similar to what Salesforce and Tableau offers. I think that when I look at this, I think that this is a reality of vendors who are seeing the need to make their solutions cloud friendly, but also realizing that in order to cloudify, you have to have the right infrastructure in place. And so that's where HPE comes into the equation. And SAP doesn't have a big infrastructure as a service business to lean on. HPE slides in. This allows SAP to compete more effectively. It allows HPE to get more involved in this particular kind of offering. So again, it's a win for the brands. It's a win for SAP and HPE, and it's a win for customers as well, who really need this kind of thing.
Yeah, and as we have witnessed the last few years, HP's really gained market share and made inroads with its GreenLake cloud platform. So this just sort of reinforces that.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So what about SAS's partnership with Microsoft Azure?
Yes, sure. So, SAS has been a major force in the analytics space for decades, and they've just announced the partnership with Azure. So basically, it's pretty straightforward. So this enables SAS customers to migrate the SAS analytics products and their solutions onto Microsoft Azure as the preferred cloud provider. And basically, so you can leverage SAS industry solutions and expertise, and it's going to also bring value to Microsoft's customers as well. So those in healthcare, financial services, and other industries. And basically, this partnership, it builds on SAS integrations across Microsoft cloud solutions. So we have not only Azure, but Dynamics 365, Microsoft 365, and the Power Platform. So this is a very logical and smart combination, right? Because we have SAS, which is very powerful in its analytics, and combining with Microsoft, who, especially through its different 365 offerings, has become quite the market player as well. So.
Yeah, I agree. This is kind of a no-brainer. This is a great evolution, a great partnership between these two. So we look at all the tech brands that we've talked about during the course of this conversation: Cisco, ServiceNow, SAP, HPE, IBM, Adobe, SAS, Microsoft, Azure, pronounced correctly that time. And, another one is not to be left out. We've got Siemens' partnership with Salesforce as part of their new workplace technology suite. And this is a partnership intended to allow companies to safely send their employees back to work. There's a theme at physical offices. And this partnership combines Salesforce's Work.com that's powered by Customer 360 and Siemens' smart infrastructure, again, technology solution, infrastructure solution, including Comfy and Enlightened. And that will help orchestrate, office processes, provide a safer work environment for employees. And I think that's that's a big issue. Employees are, I will tell you that this week is the first time since the middle of March that my husband, who's in sales for a Fortune 100 company, has left the city for a business meeting, and so that's what my family's return to work looks like. But for a lot of people, return to work means physically going into an office, and we're seeing more and more offices start to call people back, and people want to feel safe. So that's really, I think, where some of these partnerships make a lot of sense. And then along the same lines here, Workday and Salesforce also offer an integrated solution also to help organizations prepare to return to work. Workday and MuleSoft have a workplace accelerator for Salesforce's work.com. And basically what this does is it gives leaders import tools that allow them to import data and synchronize employee data from other platforms that they might be using within the organization. And then they can look at this partnership it has pre-built connectors, templates, and data mappings that help with contact tracing and shift management, like in hospital settings or in factory settings or things like that. But it also helps with the development of contact centers. So when you pair this with Workday's human capital management platform, Workday customers can really get easy access to the data that they need because of this partnership with Salesforce. So I think that that's pretty cool as well. What else, Sarah? Is there another technology vendor that you have on the brain that we haven't talked about? I think the only other thing, and this isn't a partnership, this is an acquisition. I noted that Cisco recently acquired Babel Labs, and the whole point of that acquisition is to be able to use Babel Labs noise removal and speech enhancement as a way to enhance its WebEx collaboration platform, which I think is awesome. I think we've already known this, but I think the world as a whole is realizing that collaboration platforms, especially video collaboration platforms, are the future of work. They're actually the present of work, and that's not going to change. So seeing this acquisition on the part of Cisco continually trying to improve their platform, I think is interesting. What else? Is there anything else that you have on the brain that we haven't thought about in this conversation?
Well, I think, a lot of the collaborations we've talked about here and our opening theme of, working off each other's strengths is, you see vendors coming to the table saying, look, we specialize in sensor technology. And then you have a Salesforce or a Workday saying we specialize in, workforce staffing and scheduling. So I think, all these partnerships we've mentioned today, especially honing in on back to work, which is so pertinent right now, is that these collaborations, bringing these technologies together, as you've said, it's really benefiting the end user, which is the enterprises and especially the safety of their employees. So.
Yeah, and I think that putting people. I think that as we look at these trends and our advice to companies who are doing this or who are exploring these solutions or solutions in general is, putting people at the center of your return to work strategy is incredibly important. And people are afraid. They need to feel safe. They need to feel like they can trust the solutions that you're putting in front of them, and make it, make sure your messaging is not, this is, yet another move by Big Brother. I think people are a lot of times leery of things like that, but you really have to talk about in your messaging how, this is part of our path to return to normal. And we might not always use these solutions, but we might need to at least use these solutions for a while. But I think the other part of this equation that we can't leave out is our customers. So we're thinking about, in some instances, or we're talking about, return to work, getting employees back to the workplace. But we also, in another area where we have to have people first and people at the center of all of our strategies is in the consumer side of business. So, here we're in the summer months for most of us in the United States, right? And we're quickly moving into the fall and winter. And, we are still in the middle of a global pandemic, and customers, we don't know how much worse are things going to get. Are they going to get worse than they are right now? Are we going to go back to a time when we were more careful, more locked down? What are we doing in terms of, for retailers, what are we doing in terms of offering curbside pickup solutions? How can we change those? How can we, being able to use reliable data to develop those strategies that are consumer-facing strategies, I think is really important. And I think that that's really the other part of this conversation that we need to keep in mind is what are we doing for our employees and what are we doing for our customers when we're in customer-facing businesses, and how can we turn to some of these technology solutions that are smart partnerships and integrate them into what we're doing in a way that'll benefit our customers too.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree. So you've got your employees and the end user. So yeah, and I think, we always talk about digital transformation and the whole conversion of me shopping online at Apple or Best Buy and realizing I can do curbside pickup or have it delivered to my house. As we said, the pandemic isn't necessarily going away anytime soon. It's going to be in different stages. So, and especially as the winter comes and we might be, my local mall is physically open, but It's nice to have the option of doing curbside pickups.
Right. I've only done curbside pickup once in this whole pandemic. And, I think one reason is that I'm kind of a grocery store in-person kind of person. Mm-hmm. And so even in the early days, I would shop once every couple of weeks and that was fine. But I did buy some dog food and pick that up curbside. And that it's just so funny. Like everybody has their different habits, their different norms. And for me, ordering online and having delivered is not generally what I do unless I'm buying, something from Amazon or some other e-commerce site. But I mean, locally, like ordering groceries and having delivered or ordering food and having it delivered, I don't tend to be that person. But it is interesting to see that. And I think that a whole separate conversation is the customer experience of those situations beyond what we're talking about, which is data partnerships and technology partnerships, but going back to the idea of the experience and customers' experience specifically. One of the things that has been happening to me on a regular basis is that when I am physically somewhere doing my shopping, having employees of the store get in my way. Because they're fulfilling online orders. Mm-hmm. And I think both are very important, but I think what needs to happen, like from an internal training, messaging, customer experience standpoint, what you don't want if you're a retailer is you don't want to chase customers like me away. You want to be able to welcome them into a warm and safe and inviting environment and let them buy. I think chances are good they buy. I think customers in many instances actually buy more when they're on site because of impulse buys. Mm-hmm. At least I do. But I think that you need to be mindful, brands need to be mindful of the fact that you have these two solutions going on, and you want to teach your employees that the customer experience that you're serving up when you're, getting in front of somebody who's a customer who's in person, like you can wait 2 seconds to fulfill your order, let the customer in there, or just be mindful of the fact that those customers exist. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but that's kind of been on my mind from a customer experience standpoint lately.
Yeah, I was last Saturday at a major grocery chain, and I just noticed sort of a cluster of employees standing in the aisle talking to one another.
Yeah.
And they were right in front of the gluten-free pasta. And I was like, I'm going to come back because there's 3 employees. They all had their masks on. I had my mask on, but it was a little bit of a red flag for me.
Right.
So, and then I actually forgot about the gluten-free pasta.
So yeah, but that's my point. Like when you extrapolate that out times hundreds and hundreds of customers who are experiencing this. And by the way, I experience this all the time. And I will say that probably one of the biggest places that I experience it is at my local Whole Foods. And I know that they do a very big delivery business. I think that's great. I 100% support people who want to order and have it delivered. but there needs to be that awareness, and it's just like you're raising teenagers. I'm raising teenagers. I feel like, I have conversations with them all the time about pointing out, like, this is how you do this, or this is why this is important, or this is, why you stop and open a door for somebody, or whatever. Just those little life lessons. I think that same kind of training needs to happen in the workforce. And the reality of it is, if senior leaders aren't aware that this is a problem at the store level, it'll never get fixed. So, perhaps someone from Whole Foods will be run across our webcast and learn something from a customer experience standpoint that'll change everything about those experiences that we're seeing.
And actually, my cluster experience was at Whole Foods.
See?
So I wasn't going to mention the chain, but since you've already put it out.
No, I think that's, and I think, and again, like I shop at a number of grocery stores. I think this happens to me most at Whole Foods, but I also think that Whole Foods probably, who, by the way, also has the greatest customer service, generally speaking, really great customer service. But I just think it's something they're missing. I think it's something they're just not thinking of. So I find it, and I knew as soon as you were talking about it, you were probably talking about the same thing. And it may seem like small inconveniences that we're talking about, but as a business strategist and analysts, when you look at the bottom line and you think how many people didn't get gluten-free pasta because someone was standing in the way, or how many people were irritated because I couldn't get to the yogurt case because two people were filling orders and they were oblivious to my presence, and so I was just frustrated and I bought my yogurt somewhere else. Those dollars add up. So anyway, interesting. Well, Sarah, I think that kind of wraps it up for this episode of our webcast. As always, it is a pleasure spending time with you. And I think that I forgot at the beginning of this episode to leave you with our disclaimer. We often mention publicly traded companies. We have lots of thoughts and opinions and advice, none of which should be taken or construed in any way as investment advice. These shows are for information purposes only. So with that, we will thank you for hanging out with us today. Thank you, Sarah, for joining me, and we'll see you next time.
There will be plenty of more tech topics and tech conversations right here on the Futurum Tech Podcast, FTP. Hit that subscribe button, join us, become part of our community. We would love to hear from you. Check us out, futurumresearch.com or Futurum Tech Podcast. Daniel Newman, Fred McClymans, Olivier Blanchard. We'll see you later.